Hello and welcome. You've found your way to a quiet place, a place for a story to unfold gently as you prepare for rest. There is nothing to do right now, nowhere to be. Just find a comfortable position. Let your body feel heavy, supported, and still. Tonight's story is a quiet one. There are no jumps, no gore, just a calm, unhurried story of shadows and whispers in the digital world. It's a story about a ghost in the system. So take a slow, deep breath and let it go. Let the sounds of your room fade into the background, and let my voice be a soft guide as we travel back in time to the year 2018. Our story begins in a city cradled by mountains, the city of Santiago in Chile. Imagine it now. The sun has long set behind the vast, dark shoulders of the Andes Mountains. Their snowy peaks, even in the darkness, hold a faint silver light from the moon. They are ancient guardians, watching over the sprawling city below. Down in the valley, millions of lights flicker, a soft golden tapestry woven across the landscape. From high above, the city looks peaceful, breathing. The sounds of the day have softened to a distant hum. The rush of traffic has become a gentle sigh, a whisper carried on the cool night air. In neighborhoods nestled against the foothills, families are asleep. The day's worries have been put away. Dreams are beginning to drift through quiet rooms. In the heart of the city, in the financial district known as Sanhattan, the tall buildings of glass and steel stand like silent sentinels. Their own lights are mostly dark now. Just a few scattered windows remain lit, lonely squares of gold in the vast, dark facades. One of these buildings is home to the Banco de Chile, the Bank of Chile. During the day, it is a hive of activity, a place of purpose, of numbers, of conversations. But now, in the deep of the night, it is quiet. It is a great stone and glass giant, sleeping along with the rest of the city. The marble floors of its grand lobby are polished and empty, reflecting the faint glow of security lights. The desks on the floors above are tidy, chairs pushed in, computers sleeping with dark screens. The city of Santiago dreamed, and the bank dreamed with it. It dreamed in currents of electricity, in the silent flow of information through its veins. It was a living thing in its own way, with its own rhythms, its own steady heartbeat. And tonight, like any other night, that heartbeat was calm and regular and slow. The great mountain range watched, impassive and ancient. The city slept below, safe and sound. And the bank, a symbol of stability and strength, rested in the heart of it all. All was as it should be. All was quiet. Inside the quiet giant, life still moved, but it moved at a different pace. The night shift was a world away from the energy of the day. It was a time of stillness, of observation, of quiet stewardship. Deep in the building's core, in a cool, climate-controlled room, was the bank's nerve center. This was the data center. It was not a room of paper and ink, but of machines, rows and rows of tall black cabinets, each with a small blinking light, some green, some blue. They blinked in a slow, steady rhythm like 1,000 tiny fireflies. The only sound was a constant, low hum, the sound of air conditioning, of cooling fans, of electricity flowing, the sound of the bank's digital heart beating. Tonight, a young man sat before a bank of monitors. His name was unimportant to our story. He was a junior IT technician, and he was here to watch, to make sure the rhythms remained steady. His face was lit by the soft blue glow of the screens. On them, lines of code scrolled past, charts rose and fell in gentle waves. It was a language he understood. It told him that the bank's digital veins were clear. That information was flowing smoothly from one place to another, from the bank's central systems to the ATMs across the city, to the banking apps on a million phones. He took a sip of his lukewarm coffee and stretched. It was a lonely job, but a peaceful one. He felt like the keeper of a lighthouse, ensuring the light never went out. He knew the system's personality. He knew it was busiest in the morning, when the city woke up and began to trade. He knew it slowed to a crawl in the deep hours of the night, when most of its work was to simply maintain itself, to rest and prepare for the next day. It was a predictable, reliable machine. A heavy door opened with a soft sigh, and a night guard appeared. An older man with kind eyes. "Everything quiet down here?" the guard asked, his voice low. The technician nodded, giving a small smile. "As always, Miguel. Just the music of the machines." The guard nodded back. "Good. The best kind of music for this time of night." He gave a small wave and continued his rounds, his footsteps echoing softly before fading away. The technician turned back to his screens. He watched the flow of data, the digital tides ebbing and flowing. It was a delicate ecosystem. Billions of bits of information, each a tiny fish in a vast, invisible river. Each knew its path. Each had a purpose. The system was designed for order, for security, for trust. Every connection was protected by gates and keys, passwords and protocols. It was a digital fortress built over decades, improved every year. Tonight the fortress was quiet. The gates were locked. The sentinels, the firewalls, the security software were on duty, their tiny lights blinking steadily in the dark. All was well. The technician felt the familiar calm of routine. The system was healthy. The city was sleeping. And he was here, a quiet guardian watching over the silent, dreaming machine. But something else was watching too. It had been watching for a very long time. It was not a person in a room. It had no face, no name. Think of it as a presence, a digital ghost. For months it had moved through the vast, interconnected world outside the bank's walls. It was infinitely patient. Patience was its greatest strength. It did not knock on the main gates of the fortress. It did not try to break down the heavy doors. Instead, it watched. It listened. Imagine a naturalist sitting perfectly still in a forest for days, just to understand the habits of a rare bird. The ghost was like that. It learned the rhythms of the Banco de Chile from a great distance. It learned when the digital tides were high and when they were low. It learned the names of the employees, not by seeing them, but by seeing their digital footprints. The emails they sent, the documents they signed. It learned the language of the bank, the specific terms and phrases used in official communications. It learned the hierarchy, who reported to whom, who had the authority to approve transactions, who was in charge of which department. It did not learn these things in a day or a week. It learned them over seasons. It collected information slowly, piece by piece, like a bird building a nest one twig at a time. Each piece was small and insignificant on its own. A name here, an email address there, a detail about a software update, but together they formed a map, a detailed, intricate map of the bank's internal world. The ghost knew the digital pathways. It knew the locked doors and the secret passages. Not because it had been inside, but because it had studied the blueprints for so long that it could imagine the interior perfectly. It was a silent, invisible observer. It never raised its voice. It never made a sudden move. It simply watched and waited for the right moment. It waited for a moment of human distraction, a moment when the guardians of the fortress might be looking the other way. It knew that the strongest fortress in the world still has people inside, and people get busy. People get tired. People make small mistakes. The ghost was not looking for a grand failure. It was looking for a tiny crack. A door left unlocked for just a second. A whisper in the wires that no one would notice. It was patient, and its time was drawing near. The beginning was so small it wasn't a beginning at all. It was just another moment in another busy day, weeks before our story truly begins. Imagine a typical afternoon in the bank's corporate office. The air is filled with the low hum of conversation, the tapping of keyboards, the ringing of distant phones. An employee, let's call him David, is working at his desk. He has a dozen tasks to complete before the end of the day. His email inbox is full. Messages arrive every few seconds. Each one demands a small piece of his attention. One email appears. It looks like all the others. The sender's name is familiar. It seems to be from a manager in another department. The subject line is bland, something about a company policy update. Inside the email there is a link. Click here for details. David is busy. He is multitasking. He skims the message. It looks legitimate. It sounds right. He clicks the link. For a moment, a window opens, showing what looks like a loading screen. Then it closes. Nothing else happens. His computer doesn't crash. No alarms go off. He forgets about it almost instantly and moves on to the next email, the next task. A quiet click, a moment of inattention. That was all it took. The click did not unleash a virus. It did not trigger a dramatic attack. It simply opened a door. A very small, very secret door, deep in the digital labyrinth of the bank's network. It was a door that no one else could see. And through that door the digital ghost slipped inside. It moved with absolute silence. It did not announce its presence. It found a dark, forgotten corner of the system to hide in. A place where no one ever looked. An old file server, a forgotten piece of software. And there, it waited. It did its work from the shadows. It continued to watch, but now from the inside. It moved slowly, carefully, from one part of the system to another. It never took a step that would make a sound. It gathered more keys, more credentials, the digital identities of employees. It collected them not by force, but by quietly observing them as they were used. It was like a shadow learning the shape of the person who cast it. Weeks went by. The bank continued to operate normally. The digital heartbeat remained steady. The technicians in the data center saw nothing unusual on their screens. The employees, including David, went about their days, unaware of the silent guest that was now living among them. The ghost was patient. It was mapping the fortress from within, and preparing for the night when it would finally act. Let us settle now on a specific day. Thursday, May 24th, 2018. It begins like any other day in Santiago. The sun rises over the Andes, casting long shadows across the city. The streets fill with the sounds of morning traffic. People make their way to work, coffee in hand, thinking about the day ahead. It is the end of the work week, and there is a feeling of gentle anticipation for the weekend. Inside the Banco de Chile, the day is ordinary. The lobby fills with customers, the phones ring, the keyboards click. Meetings are held in glass-walled conference rooms. Decisions are made. Numbers are crunched. The vast, complex machinery of a modern bank is in full motion. The digital ghost remains silent. It observes the final pieces of the puzzle falling into place. It sees the flow of money, the authorizations, the final checks and balances that happen at the end of a business day. It understands the rhythm completely now. As the afternoon wears on, the energy in the building begins to wind down. People start to pack their bags. They talk of plans for the evening, for the weekend. "See you on Monday," one colleague says to another, shrugging on his coat. "You too, have a good weekend." The conversation is light, easy. The work is done. One by one they leave. The elevators carry them down to the lobby, and they step out into the cool evening air of Santiago. The sun is setting again, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Soon the building is mostly empty. The cleaning crews arrive, their movements quiet and methodical. The lights are turned off, floor by floor. The bank settles into its nighttime state. The quiet hum of the data center becomes the most prominent sound. The junior technician arrives for his shift, exchanging a few pleasant words with the colleague he is replacing. The night guard, Miguel, begins his slow, steady rounds. Everything is in its place. Everything is normal. There is no sense of foreboding, no feeling of tension in the air. It is just another Thursday night in Santiago, a peaceful end to a busy week. The city is preparing to rest, and in the quiet, dark corners of the bank's digital network, the ghost is preparing to work. The long, patient observation is over. The time for action has arrived. The change, when it came, was small. It was almost insignificant. It began after midnight in the deepest part of the night. The technician in the data center was watching his screens, his eyes tracing the familiar patterns. And then he noticed something. On one of the servers, a new process had started, and a small unfamiliar piece of code was running. He frowned. This was not part of the usual nightly routine. He watched it for a moment. It didn't seem to be doing anything harmful. It was just there. An anomaly. A question mark. Then, on his own computer screen, a small window popped open. It was a command prompt, a simple black box with a blinking cursor. He hadn't opened it. He tried to close it, but it wouldn't respond. A moment later, another one appeared on the screen next to his, then another. He called his supervisor at home. "Something strange is happening with the servers," he said, his voice calm but alert. At the same time, in other departments on computers that had been left on, the same thing was happening. So a small odd window would appear. Sometimes a file would be deleted, not an important file, a temporary file, an icon on the desktop. It was like a mischievous prank, an annoyance. The bank's automated security systems began sending out low-level alerts. Nothing critical. Just notifications that something was a little off. The IT team, both the few on site and the others called in from home, began to investigate. Sleepy note. What the employees and the IT team were seeing was a carefully designed piece of theatre. The strange windows, the deleted files, this was all a distraction. It was a digital smokescreen designed to make a lot of noise and draw all attention to one part of the system. It was like a magician waving one hand dramatically so you don't notice what the other hand is quietly doing. The virus, as they began to call it, was loud and visible. It was designed to be found. It was designed to be confusing. It made the IT team focus their energy on containing it, on figuring out what it was doing. They were trying to solve a puzzle that was placed directly in front of them, and the puzzle was designed to be unsolvable in the short term. It was a curtain, and behind it, the real show was about to begin. The digital ghost had just turned on the stage lights. The illusion began to spread, but not like a wildfire. It moved more like a slow, creeping fog. One by one, workstations across the bank began to show the signs. A desktop background would suddenly go black. The mouse cursor would freeze for a few seconds. Then a more serious symptom appeared. The core banking software, the program that employees used to access customer accounts and perform transactions, became unresponsive. The system was being choked, slowly and methodically. The IT team was now fully engaged. Phone calls crisscrossed the city in the quiet hours of the early morning. "What are you seeing in your division?" one technician asked another over the phone. "Same thing here. The terminal servers are not responding. It's like they're overwhelmed." "Is it a network failure?" "It doesn't feel like one. It feels intentional." Their training kicked in. They followed their procedures. They tried to isolate the affected parts of the network, but every time they closed one door, the problem would appear somewhere else. It was like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. The virus seemed to be everywhere at once. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't destroying critical data. It was simply disruptive. It was bringing the bank's internal operations to a grinding halt. It was a slow digital paralysis. The focus of every single IT professional at the Banco de Chile was now on this one problem: how to stop the cascade, how to restore the systems, how to give the employees the tools they needed for the business day that would start in just a few hours. They were looking at the flickering screens, at the error messages, at the strange black windows. Their attention was completely captured by the visible symptoms of the sickness. They were dedicated, talented people, working hard to protect the bank. And that is exactly what the ghost was counting on. It needed them to be looking here, at the chaos it had created, so they would not look anywhere else. While the IT team wrestled with the smokescreen, the real work was happening in a place they weren't watching. It was a quiet, secure corner of the network. The part of the system that connects the Banco de Chile to the rest of the world is financial institutions. This place was the digital equivalent of a sealed, soundproof room. The ghost had found its way here long ago. It had the keys. It knew the protocols. Imagine a master forger sitting in a quiet room with the perfect paper, the perfect ink, the perfect seal. The ghost began to create messages. They were not emails or simple text files. They were highly specialized transaction requests, written in the strict, precise language of international finance. Each message was a command: move this amount of money from this account here to that account there. The messages were flawless. They bore all the correct digital signatures. They had all the necessary stamps of approval. They looked completely legitimate. To the global network, these messages did not look like theft. They looked like business as usual. One by one, the ghost sent these messages out into the world. They traveled silently through undersea cables, across continents in the blink of an eye. The first message instructed a bank in Hong Kong to transfer a sum of money. The second, to a bank in Dubai. a third to one in Europe. Each transaction was large, but not so large as to trigger immediate, automatic fraud alerts. They were carefully calculated to fly just under the radar. There was no drama, no alarm bells ringing across the globe. It was just a quiet series of communications between trusted partners, a simple, silent exchange of information. The ghost was not breaking down the doors of the vault. It was using the bank's own keys to ask the vault to open itself. And in the data center in Santiago, the IT team was still fighting the shadows on the wall, completely unaware of the silent river of money flowing out of the bank's reserves. The night felt endless. For the technicians and managers of the bank, time seemed to slow down. The blinking green lights on the servers, usually a sign of health, now seemed to mock them. Every attempt to fix the problem was met with a new, frustrating obstacle. They would restart a server, and for a moment it would seem to work. The systems would come back online, a small wave of relief, and then, minutes later, the fog would roll back in. The screens would freeze again, the strange windows would reappear. A senior manager, who had driven into the office in the middle of the night, walked into the data center. The air was cool and tense. "Any progress?" he asked, his voice low and tired. The young technician looked up from his screen, his eyes weary. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," he admitted. "We block one pathway, it finds another. It's not breaking anything. It's just being in the way." The manager nodded, placing a hand on the technician's shoulder for a moment. "Keep at it. The sun will be up soon. We need something working by then." Outside, the city of Santiago was still. The last of the late-night revelers had gone home. The streets were empty. The only light came from the street lamps casting long, lonely shadows. The Andes were a dark silhouette against a sky that was just beginning to think about turning grey. The world outside was peaceful, oblivious. It was a strange contrast. The deep, silent peace of the sleeping city, and the quiet, frantic struggle taking place within the glass tower. The ghost continued its silent work. More messages were sent, more funds were moved. The ghost worked with an inhuman focus, no emotion, no fatigue, just a calm, cold execution of a plan that had been months in the making. It knew exactly how much time it had. It knew that the distraction could not last forever. Eventually the sun would rise, the business day would start, and the world would begin to notice. But for now, in the final precious hours of darkness, it was in complete control. The bank was blind, and the ghost was the only one who could see. Just as the first faint hint of dawn touched the peaks of the Andes, something began to change. The virus, the digital prankster that had tormented the IT team all night, began to recede. It happened on its own. No one did anything to fix it. It simply started to fade away. The strange black windows closed themselves. The frozen mouse cursors began to move again. The core banking software, which had been unresponsive for hours, flickered back to life. One by one, the systems returned to normal. The error messages on the technicians' screens disappeared. The cascade of alerts stopped. A weary cheer went through the IT department. They were exhausted, but they felt a sense of victory. They believed their efforts had finally paid off. They had weathered the storm. The fever, it seemed, had broken. The long night was over. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm golden light over Santiago, the bank slowly came back to life. Employees began to arrive for the Friday workday. They heard stories of the IT team's heroic all-night effort. They were told that the systems were now stable. There was a sense of collective relief. The bank had faced a strange and difficult technical problem, and it had been solved. The digital ghost was gone. It had slipped out as quietly as it had slipped in. Its work was complete. The distraction it had created vanished, leaving the IT team to write up their reports and try to understand what had happened. They would spend weeks analyzing the strange code, but they would find that it was designed to self-destruct, to erase its own tracks. It was a tool built for a single purpose on a single night, and now that its purpose was served, it was nothing more than a memory, a ghost of a problem. The bank was waking up, and the city was starting a new day, and for a few hours it seemed as though the story was over. It was mid-morning on Friday. The immediate crisis had passed. The bank was operating, albeit with a few lingering technical hiccups. The mood was one of tired recovery. But in a quiet office on one of the upper floors, a different story was beginning to unfold. A senior manager in the International Finance Division was reviewing the previous day's transaction logs. This was a routine part of his job. He was a meticulous man, a man who believed that everything had its proper place. His eyes scanned the long lists of numbers. Everything seemed normal, the usual transfers to correspondent banks around the world. But then he saw it. It wasn't a blaring red flag. It was more like a single misplaced book in a vast, perfectly organized library. A transaction, a large one. He didn't remember approving it. He frowned, leaning closer to his screen. He pulled up the details. The digital paperwork was all there, all the right signatures, all the right codes. On paper, it was a perfectly valid transfer, but it felt wrong. A quiet instinct, born from decades of experience, told him something was out of tune. He picked up his phone and called one of his subordinates. "Maria, could you come in here for a moment?" A moment later, a woman appeared at his door. "Good morning, sir." "Maria, look at this," he said, pointing to the line on his screen. "This transfer to Hong Kong, do you recall this?" She looked at the record. She saw her own digital signature attached to the approval chain, but she had no memory of it. "No," she said slowly, I don't. I was working on the European accounts all day yesterday." He nodded slowly. His quiet unease was beginning to grow into a cold knot in his stomach. "Please," he said, his voice calm and steady, "pull up all of our international SWIFT transfers from yesterday afternoon. Every single one." He was no longer looking for a single misplaced book. He had a sudden terrible feeling that the entire library had been rearranged while no one was looking. The truth did not come in a rush. It came piece by quiet piece. Maria returned with a list. As they went through it, the manager's face grew pale. There wasn't just one unfamiliar transaction. There were several. To Hong Kong, to Dubai, to New York. All were large. All were sent during the late afternoon on Thursday, and all of them had the perfect, flawless digital paperwork. They looked at each other, the unspoken understanding passing between them. This was not a mistake. This was not a system glitch. Sleepy note: the SWIFT network they were examining is not a system that holds or transfers money itself. It's more like a highly secure private messaging system for banks. It allows them to send trusted instructions to each other. The ghost didn't break into SWIFT. It used the bank's own legitimate access to send fraudulent but perfectly formed messages. They realized with a dawning horror what had happened. The chaos of the previous night, the virus that had consumed all the attention of the IT department. It was a diversion, a magic trick. While the entire bank was looking at the magician's waving hand, the ghost had been quietly emptying the pockets of the institution. The manager picked up his phone again, his hand steady despite the tremor he felt inside. He called the bank's chief executive. "Sir," he said, his voice low and grave, "I think we have a serious problem." The dialogue that followed was quiet, stunned. "How many?" the chief executive asked. The manager took a breath. "We're still counting, but it looks significant." "How is that possible? All transfers require multiple approvals." "I know, sir," the manager replied, "but according to the system, they had them." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. The digital ghost was gone. But now, in the bright light of day, they could see the footprints it had left behind. The next few hours were a blur of quiet, urgent activity. A small, trusted group of senior executives was assembled. There was no panic, just a grim, focused effort to understand the full scale of what had happened. Their first calls were to the correspondent banks around the world, where the money had been sent. They were trying to stop the transfers, to freeze the funds. But they were too late. The ghost had planned its timing perfectly. By the time the discovery was made in Chile on Friday morning, it was already Friday evening or Saturday in the destinations in Asia and the Middle East. The money had arrived, and it had already been moved again. It was sent from the first account to a second, from the second to a third. It was being laundered, split into smaller amounts and scattered across the globe. Chasing it was like trying to reassemble a cup of water that had been thrown into a river. The ghost had left almost no trace within the Banco de Chile's systems. The malicious code had erased itself. The entry point was a mystery. The path it had taken through the network was invisible. It had moved like a true ghost, passing through digital walls without leaving a mark. The only evidence it had ever been there was the money that was now gone. The investigators, both from the bank and later from international agencies, would spend months trying to piece together the puzzle. They would eventually trace the ghost's methods to a shadowy group of cyber criminals, a sophisticated entity known for its patience and precision. But attribution was not recovery. The money had vanished into the vast, anonymous depths of the global financial system. It was an echo of a crime. A perfect silent exit. The ghost had come, done its work, and disappeared back into the digital ether from which it came. In the days that followed, the bank had to face the world. It was a difficult, delicate process. They had to be transparent, but they also had to maintain public confidence. A bank runs on trust, and that trust had been shaken, not by a physical robbery, but by an invisible one. A bank representative in a quiet, formal press conference made a statement. "We want to assure all of our customers," he said, his voice steady, "that none of your personal funds have been affected by this incident. The bank will absorb the entirety of the loss." And it did. The final amount was around $10 million, a significant sum, but one the large institution could withstand. The true cost was not in the money, but in the new understanding of vulnerability. The fortress they had built, the digital walls they had trusted, had been quietly and elegantly bypassed. The story became a legend in the world of cybersecurity, a case study in patience and distraction. It wasn't the biggest heist in history, but it was one of the quietest. It was a reminder that the most significant events can happen in silence, while everyone is looking the other way. The mystery of the ghost lingered. No one was ever arrested. The group suspected of being behind it remained in the shadows, a faceless, nameless entity. The Banco de Chile rebuilt its defenses, made them stronger. Life in Santiago went on. People still used the ATMs. They still checked their balances on their phones. To the outside world, the great stone and glass giant in the financial district was the same as it had always been, a symbol of stability. But inside, there was a new memory, a new story, the story of the night the ghost came to visit. And so, our story comes to a close. Let us return one last time to the city of Santiago. It is night again. Perhaps it is tonight. The same ancient mountains watch over the valley. The same blanket of lights shimmers below. The Banco de Chile stands tall and silent, its windows dark. Inside, the data center hums its steady, rhythmic song. The fortress is stronger now, the guardians are more vigilant, but the world of wires and whispers is vast, and it holds its secrets. The story is over. The ghost has faded back into memory. The city is at peace, and now it is time for you to be at peace as well. Let the details of the story drift away like clouds passing in the night sky. Feel the weight of your body, comfortable and relaxed. Listen to the sound of your own quiet breathing, in and out. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are ready for a deep and restorative sleep. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed our time together, please leave a gentle comment below. It is always a joy to hear from you. Until next time, sleep well.